Good morning and welcome to this United Nations World Interfaith Harmony Week event, Justice and Reconciliation. My dear friends, World Interfaith Harmony Week is an annual event to promote harmony between people regardless of their faith. World Interfaith Harmony Week wants to promote dialogue among different faiths and religions to create mutual understanding, cooperation, and harmony between people. My name is Father Prakash Lohale, and I am the director of the Archdiocese of Toronto Office for Interreligious Dialogue. With the collaboration of Kathy Murtha at the Mary Watts Center and a dedicated team at the Toronto Catholic District School Board, we are pleased to offer this opportunity for people of diverse backgrounds to listen, learn, and engage in the work of justice and reconciliation. In 2019, at the meeting in Abu Dhabi, Pope Francis said, "There is no alternative. We will either build a future together or there will not be a future." And again, to the bishops of Asia in August 2014, Pope Francis said, "We are enriched by the wisdom of the other and become open to traveling together the path to greater understanding, friendship, and solidarity."
With these quotes in mind, we begin to listen, learn, and engage. Today, we welcome over 500 participants registered for this event, many of whom are grade 9 to 12 students joining as a class from across 4 school boards: Toronto, York, Simcoe Muskoka, and Peterborough, Victoria, Northumberland, and Clarington Catholic school boards. We also welcome the broader interfaith community. If you feel comfortable, we invite you to share the spiritual tradition that you identify with in the chat.
We also invite you to acknowledge whose traditional land and territory you reside on. And as Audrey mentioned, by typing it in the chat. If you're not aware of this, we encourage you to visit a website, and it's native-land.ca. And this maps the sacred boundaries of traditional Indigenous territories around the world. Whether we are born here as non-Indigenous peoples or moved to this land, we are all settlers and express our gratitude for the friendship and trust bestowed by Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the hurt caused by broken promises and dishonoring a sacred covenant, the treaties. We have broken our relationships to each other and to the land. We acknowledge as settlers that continue to benefit from this hurt, we must commit to listening with an open heart, what is needed for healing, with a willingness to make meaningful change, starting with ourselves. If you are in Toronto, Treaty 13, please join us in saying the land acknowledgement, or say your own land acknowledgement wherever you are. Let's do it together mindfully with a commitment to move to reconciliation. Out of our deep respect for Indigenous peoples in Canada, we acknowledge that Toronto is situated upon traditional territories of the Anishnaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples. We also acknowledge the land covered by Treaty 13 is held by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and Toronto is subject to the dish with one spoon covenant. We also recognize the contributions and enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Ontario and in the rest of Canada.
Good morning, everyone. Elder John Robinson, assisted by Sister Petite Lau, will lead our opening prayer. I've had the privilege of knowing John and working with him for many years. John Robinson is an Ojibwe elder from Sault Ste. Marie. When St. Pope John Paul II visited Toronto in 1984, the very first Pope to ever step foot on Canadian soil, John was invited to do the smudging and purifying ceremony, and he had the privilege of conversing with this interfaith giant. John continues to serve people by sharing his Indigenous culture, helping people to be attentive to the Creator and the unity and sacredness of all life. He honors both his Indigenous and Catholic heritage. Sister Petite Lau is a member of the Sisters of Our Lady of the Missions. She lived and worked among the Dulang Manabo tribe in Mindanao, Philippines. Her main focus was cultural regeneration and self-determination of the Dulangan Manabo tribe. Here in Toronto, Petite is pursuing a doctorate in ministry at the University of Toronto with special focus on Indigenous awareness. She is the coordinator of the Indigenous and Community Relations at the Mary Ward Center. Both John and Petite are members of the Native Peoples Parish, which gathers at St. Anne's Church in Toronto. This morning, Elder John will be leading a smudging ceremony, which, as I understand it, is a way of purifying and clearing our minds and our hearts so that we can be truly open and present to one another and the Creator. This will be followed by prayers to the four directions, which is a way of giving thanks to the Creator for all the gifts of this world. I'm sure there's much more, but Elder John will explain it to you. So please feel free to join in or respectfully observe. We're going to begin now with a beautiful Indigenous image, Sunrise Prayers, by Diane Montroy, an Eastern Métis Algonquin artist and knowledge keeper. The ceremony will conclude with another moving piece of art by Diane called Healing Herbs. So take a moment now, silence, and allow Diane's art to center you and to prepare you for what will follow.
Today, I welcome everyone for being part of this service, and it's called a purification ceremony. And the representation here is earth, wind, fire, and water. The feather represents the wind because you fan, you'll feel the breeze, and the shell represents the water. And the earth that's inside here represents the earth that we're on, like Mother Earth is that we're on. And the fire, the charcoal that's burning represents the warmness that we feel here on earth. And so, and the four colors that are here are yellow, red, black, and white. It's also representation of the four colors of man. And it's also a representation of the four directions. Like the yellow is east, the red is south, black is west, white is north. And we always pray, it's in the 6 directions we pray. And it's like the 4 directions and the 6 directions. So, so you're welcome to join me in facing the directions wherever you are, whatever direction the eastern direction is. We always begin in the east and end in the north. So you're welcome to join me in whatever direction you're at in your area. you're welcome to face that direction. So miigwech. As we face the east, we thank you, Creator, for all the gifts from the east, for the rising of the sun each day that lets us know that a new day has begun. And each day begins, we're on a new journey. We ask that you travel with us on this journey and that you show us the right pathway to follow, and that we follow in a good way, and that we follow in your way. And for all these gifts and gifts of the east, we say, miigwech. As we face the south, we thank you, Creator, for all the gifts from the south, for the warm winds that blows across the land, that's able to melt the coldness that we feel in our own hearts. Sometimes we're unable to reach out. With these warm winds, we're able to reach out in a good way, reach out to all our brothers and our sisters on the way. The South is also a place for our youth, that they look up to us, that we guide them in a good way, and that we show them the right pathway to follow. And for all these gifts and the gifts of the South, we say, miigwech. As we face the West, we thank you, Creator, for all the gifts from the West, for the Western doorway that our ancestors have passed through, that one day we too will pass through this Western door, and the ancestors will be there to greet us with open arms and welcome us. The West is also a place of the setting of the sun. It reminds us it is time for us to rest. It is time for us to sleep. It is time for us visions and dreams. And for all these gifts and the gifts of the West, we say, miigwech. As we face the North, we thank you, Creator, for all the gifts from the North, for the snow that falls each season. Snow is white, and white is a sign of purity, that you're blessing us and blanket us with this snow. When the snow falls, everything sleeps under the snow. When spring comes, it's a new beginning. It's a new beginning for us all. The snow also reminds us the white hair of our elders, for the wisdom that they have to share with us, that they share in a good way, and we also share in a good way. And for all these gifts and the gifts of the North, we say, miigwech. We also thank you, Creator, for the gifts of Mother Earth, for all the gifts that she has given us to use, even though sometimes we abuse the gifts that she has given us. Like a mother, she's always there and willing to forgive. She forgives her children for all the wrong that they have done to her. And for all the wrong that I have done to you, Mother Earth, I ask for your forgiveness. And for all the gifts that you have given us to use, we say, miigwech. We also thank you, Creator, for the gift of your Son that you have sent to us to teach us, to guide us in a good way, and to show us the right pathway to follow. And for all these gifts and the gift of your Son, we say, miigwech. And for all our people gathered here today, Creator, we say, miigwech. And it's also said the drum is the heartbeat of Mother Earth. Miigwech. Miigwech.
Let us reflect for a few moments of silence. Thank you, Elder John and Sister Petit. We're now going to listen to some panel members who are going to inform us of their work and their faith on justice and reconciliation. We have speakers from 5 spiritual traditions: Anishnaabe, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Sikhism. Each guest will have about 8 minutes, so let us please respect their time frame and give each panel member a chance to share. A 1-minute warning will be given in the chat, so we apologize to the speakers for any interruption. And audience, you're welcome to post any questions in the chat. However, they will be answered and addressed after all the panel speakers have had their turn. So let us welcome our first guest. He is an Indigenous artist, a b-boy, and MC who uses hip hop to deliver his message. It is my pleasure to welcome Hugh Rock.
Kaccamo and Gitchemigwech, Elder John. Thank you for that beautiful ceremony. Ni Anishnaabe, Manitou Nimin Adishnakaz. Greetings, I see the light in you. My name is Spirit Dancing. I'm from Nipissing First Nation. I'm Anishnaabe in Odawa. And today I'm here to share a bit about my experiences growing up as an Anishnaabe person here in North America on Turtle Island. And just some of the ways that I use art forms to help, just help share messages that are positive. I grew up on Nipissing, which is a reservation about 4 hours north of Toronto. And I grew up with I grew up understanding the ceremonies and the traditions of my culture and the approaches. And I was very fortunate that my Nokomis was a fluent speaker of our language. So she spoke Anishnaabe Moan to me at a very young age. And so did all of my great aunts and uncles. Language is a very important part of my culture. And so are our ceremonies. In actuality, our ceremonies are our education system. It's how our culture is passed to the next generation in so many different layers. I grew up knowing that I am a spirit, having a physical experience here on Turtle Island, on Mother Earth. And while I am here, I also have roles and responsibilities. I follow the original instructions that were given to the Anishnaabe people. And I'd like to share a few of those instructions with you. One of the original instructions that were given to the human nation was here on Turtle Island, while we live on Mother Earth, it's important that we always walk gentle or also walk in prayer. The way that the Anishnaabe that I was raised and how I was taught to pray was through gratitude and acknowledgement, acknowledging that all things are connected and that essentially all life is my relative. I am connected to all things through family. So I moved to the city when I was about 6, 7 years old, and I started to experience other cultures. I found that it was very hard to fit into Western culture. There was a lot of compromising that I would have to do towards my value system, which is the 7 grandfather teachings. I had a really difficult time fitting in until I discovered hip hop. And when I discovered hip hop culture, I saw 4 art forms that resonated to me deeply. As I was, being raised on my reserve, I was introduced to my culture through many different art forms. One of them being powwow ceremony, which is a fairly new ceremony in our culture. It was brought back in the 70s and was something that we really were. It was a resurgence of our culture in the 70s. Before the 70s, it was illegal for us to practice any of these ceremonies. So once powwows, became illegal, we really emerged into our culture again, full swing. My father always used to say that our culture has never been lost. It's us as humans that have been lost. And through ceremony, I've been able to find myself, my traditions, and my culture. I grew up as a grass dancer. I grew up understanding the elders in my community and their roles and responsibilities, including my own. And when I discovered hip hop for the first time, I saw breakdancing and b-boys and b-girls, and they reminded me of what I do back home, which was grass dancing. And it reminded me of fancy dancing, our own style of dancing that we do at powwows. When I saw the DJ, it reminded me of the drummers at our powwow ceremony. when I saw the storytellers at the sacred fire at the powwow ceremonies, it reminded me of like the rappers, the MCs in hip hop culture. And of course, we have a great deal of artwork in everything that we do, from the regalia that I wear when I grass dance to any of the artwork that I create. It's all very similar to what I was seeing in hip hop through graffiti. So I felt a deep connection. As Elder John was mentioning, those 4 colors are part of teachings from the medicine wheel. And I was taught to look for those things in nature, to find my balance through the medicine wheel. And I was able to actually fit hip hop culture into the medicine wheel without much effort. It was fairly easy and it was a very natural fit. So part of my culture has been a lot about educating, about sharing. Another original instruction is that we're supposed to share with one another. And one of the other instructions that is part of those original instructions is the ability to learn something new every day, learn one new thing a day. And then when you understand what you know, you're encouraged to share that. And so I grew up with 2 fairly influential parents. My father's name is Bobby Woods. He was a Cree elder who worked a lot with introducing our culture to the inmates that were in prisons across Canada. Him and Vern Harper worked close hand in hand. And there's actually a documentary about my father called The Spirit Within. I highly recommend that you watch it for Truth and Reconciliation. It'll give you some really good understandings on a lot of the statistics that my people are facing in terms of the oppression, in terms of a lot of different things that our people are facing and going through fighting colonialism. So growing up with my mother as well, my mother is two-spirited. She is also an elder, and she raised me to be a traditional Anishnaabe man, which is to be essentially a good helper. The men's role in the Anishnaabe community that I'm from plays a much different role than in the Western world. The community that I'm from is a matriarch community. We follow the 13 grandmother clan system, which essentially is the 13 full moons that are going per year. And each moon represents a different stage. And it's all representation of the power of duality, which is the formula for all life. We believe that all life has masculinity and femininity in it, including me. Like before I was born, I was a female egg before I became a male. So it's a lot of the cultural teachings that I was taught is really a deeper understandings of the connectedness and allowing me to understand who I am and how to nurture the natures that are within me. As I was getting older, wanting to do more cultural exchanges with other people, I found that hip hop was the platform that I could use to share and create awareness of concerns and issues that are going on in my community. One of the beautiful things about hip hop that I was really attracted to was that it gave me an opportunity to be a voice for the voiceless. Could I start to share some of the slides, please? Here's an installation that I just recently finished at the U of T. This is at the Daniels building. This is a vinyl installation I did for the, this is in honor of all of the children that were discovered at the Kamloops, British Columbia Residential School. There's a representation of the son, grandfather son on the left, and on the right-hand side, you'll see those 4 colors, the yellow, the red, the black, and the white. I chose to use the Anishnaabe medicine wheel. There are different types of medicine wheels, and from my understanding from the elders that I was raised with, all those medicine wheels are right. It's just depending on where you're from, that medicine wheel will fit in that geographical area. The 2 children are representations of both the masculinity and femininity of all life. The eagles are representation of how our prayers are carried to the Great Spirit, Gitche Manitou, the creator. And the fish that the eagles are carrying are to nurture the children on that journey back to the spirit world to join our ancestors. This installation actually is just being completed this month. There's going to be 215 red dots that will be put up by the students that are at the U of T I've been teaching workshops there about the medicine wheel, the 7 grandfather teachings, and the duality teachings. And with that information, I've encouraged the students to create a really positive environment for them to engage with these teachings and to also to contribute, because the medicine wheel, as Elder John was mentioning, is a representation of the 4 colors of humanity. The yellow nation, the red nation, the black nation, the white nation. When working together, we form a perfect circle. And this is what I wanted to show. I wanted to show that perfect circle, our potential, our true potential when we come together and we work together. Could we please move to the next slide? For the next slides, we can just kind of rush through them. I know I'm running out of time. This is actually my land acknowledgement. I was raised to understand that there was original 6 Nations peace treaty before humans ever came to Turtle Island. I do appreciate the land acknowledgements of the nation, but I think it's really important that we always acknowledge that there are other nations living with us, and the humans were the last nations here on Turtle Island. I can get into that story really quickly. A long time ago, there were 5 nations: the bird nation, the plant nation, the insect nation, the fish nation, and the animal nation. All those nations had to agree to become our teachers and live with us. They all agreed. And when we became here, we were given those original instructions. So this is an interpretation of that story. It's been an honor for me to be here. I know I have a very short period of time, but I'm a multidisciplinary artist who really loves to share his culture with all people, all humans, all life. And it's been an honor for me to be here. Get Gwech. Oh, that's my mom and my dad. Right there.
Miigwech, Q-Rock, for sharing your art and talents to speak out against oppression in a way that creatively inspires others to learn and act. Miigwech. It is my privilege to introduce Yacov Fruchter, who works as a director of community building and spiritual engagement for Beth Zedek Congregation, the largest conservative Jewish synagogue in Canada. Yacov was born in Montreal and is the grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors. He built a community of hundreds of inspired young Jews and empowered them to take ownership over their Jewish experiences with a focus on community building and justice. He is committed to developing understanding and connections with people of different faiths, Indigenous peoples, and others.
Boker Tov, everyone, and thank you, which means good morning, and thank you for having me and including me here today. First of all, just the previous speaker was really inspiring and feels like a gift to be able to have learned from you and heard from you this morning. And that's actually what I want to focus on is really on learning and my experience of learning. So I am a almost 40-year-old Jewish man who grew up in this great country on this wonderful land. And a part of growing up here and learning is also about unlearning and recognizing the stories that didn't come as easily. There's a great phrase that comes from Pirkei Avot, from our Jewish tradition, which is Al Shlosha Dvarim Ha'olam Omed Al Torah Al Avodah V'Gmilut Chasadim, that the world stands on 3 things, imagining the world to be this table with 3 legs, these things that allow us to be solid and feel structured in this world. And those 3 things are Torah, which is our wisdom, Avodah, which is our worship or our actions, and ultimately I'll tie to the 3rd thing, which is Gmilut Chasadim, which is acts of kindness. Our tradition is that if we want to be good people in this world, we have to do all 3. To know where we came from, we have to share wisdom, we have to act, and we have to act kindly. From the same book, from Pirkei Avot, from Ethics or Wisdom of our Ancestors, there's a question that gets asked, which is, who is wise? And the answer that's given is that the one who learns from all people. I think that's how we have to try our best to live in this world, is to recognize what we don't know and to live in this world with that approach, so that we can always learn. And just focusing for the moment on our Jewish tradition and where I learned from, I really think about three things. I think about the Torah, right? The Bible and the wisdom of the Torah. I think about the collective experience over 2,000 years of Jews wandering since the destruction of the Second Temple, always yearning to return to our land. I think also about my own personal experience, as was said, as the grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors, and what all that teaches me about reconciliation and also longing for connection. In the Torah, and we read this as a part of our high holidays, of our Rosh Hashanah service each year, we read about a disagreement between Abraham, a well-known character, and Avimelech, a less-known character, and they are fighting over land, and they are fighting over wells, and who gets access to natural resources. And ultimately, in the spot which today is known as Beersheba in Israel, they agree by performing a sacrifice together. And the word Sheva refers to a treaty, to a brit. In Hebrew, we use the word brit. It's the same thing as a treaty, as a covenant. The reality that we as human beings have to find ways to share land, share space, and of course, the risk that's there when we break it. And we read this every year on our high holidays to remind us of the essential element of the brit, of the covenant, of the treaty, and that it's not something that we can take lightly, and how often it is that we unfortunately do. And that's where a lot of our work of reconciliation really comes from, is the need to reestablish those treaties and to turn back and to understand what are all the ways every single year, as part of our high holiday experience, what are the ways in which we have failed this year to live up to the treaties in our lives. We also have in the Torah, the word ger, a stranger, comes up over and over again in our tradition. From our story of Exodus from Egypt, that really functions for us as the foundation of our understanding of what it means to be a stranger. The Torah teaches us over and over again that we have to be so careful not to oppress those who feel estranged, those who feel different in the lands that we live in. And the reason is, Ki garim haitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because we had that experience of being othered, and we've also had the experience of that salvation, of God allowing us to feel that reconnection. And through that, we are taught that it is our responsibility as Jews, and ultimately our responsibility as humans, to ensure that structures of society that oppress, that those things that get in our way of feeling free and connected, are things that we have to fight against every single day. I want to move us forward quite a bit in our Jewish history. After years of longing, 2,000 years of longing, in 1948, Jewish homeland was once again reestablished, a reconnection to the land of Israel, which is central to Jewish prayers, to Jewish dreaming and longing for all those centuries. In 2006, then AFN chief Phil Fontaine went to Israel to see the land, to see the country, and to visit. And one of the things he noticed was the revitalization of Hebrew language, a language that was whispered as part of people's dreams and prayers, but not lived for so long, and was brought back again. The connection to land for Jews is so central. The connection to language is so central. So we think of this work of reconciliation. We understand what it feels like to be disconnected, but there is a special kind of estrangement of feeling like a ger when you are still in your land but not allowed to fully function according to your traditions. That's something that as Jews we have experienced, but mostly we've been sent along throughout the world, not staying in the land of Israel, other than just a few remnants. So we don't have the complete shared experience, but we have empathy towards it and a real appreciation. Last thing I want to say is that we also believe in the Jewish tradition that there are two different kinds of disagreements. There are disagreements that are for the sake of heaven, and there are disagreements that are not. And those, according to our tradition, disagreements that are for the sake of heaven, where we believe that there are shivim panim laTorah, that there are 70 different faces to the Torah, meaning there are multiple truths in our world, but debates, conflicts that are all for the sake of allowing humans to feel free, to feel cared for, and to feel loved. Because all human beings, as being created in the image of God, all have the right, the dignities of feeling unique and also of feeling infinitely valuable. That we all have to fight for that sense of love from God and from our fellow human being. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and shalom and yitro. Lots of peace to you all.
Thank you so much, Yacov. Shalom. Thank you for sharing some of your Jewish teachings, the history, and I love the way that you ended it off. The idea of honoring and caring and loving and freedom. So we wish you the best as you continue to build relationships with your community and Indigenous peoples and just all the diverse groups that you work with. It is my pleasure now to introduce Benjamin Lujan, who is a lecturer in one of my former courses at St. Michael's College. He was so inspiring. He inspired me and many students to learn more about Indigenous spiritualities. Benjamin is a Peruvian Canadian who is currently completing a doctoral degree in theology at the University of Toronto, focusing on the area of Christian Indigenous relations. He's active in ecumenical and interfaith engagements in Canada, with special attention to issues of Indigenous justice and reconciliation. He's a member of a research project on Indigenous youth activism and spirituality at the University of Toronto. Welcome, Benjamin.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. As you can hear from my accent, I'm a Spanish speaker originally. I'm originally from Peru, and I came to Canada when I was 21 years old, so as an adult. I mention these details because it's important to make sense of what I want to share today. So I came to Canada when I was 21, and I am 45 years old now. So it's been 24 years in Canada with my whole family immigrating and many relatives here in Toronto. So I'm a Peruvian Canadian, I say. But I want to share this because part of what I want to share today is that experience of sometimes not fitting in. Maybe many of you have had that experience of having come from a different place and trying to be yourself, so-called, and not fitting in and encountering that problem. And I would say that this is very much connected to what we're talking about today, that idea of belonging to one religious tradition and deepening on one's identity spiritually, culturally, as a human, in friendship with others that are not from our own cultural, spiritual traditions, and how challenging this could be and how beautiful this could be too. So this is my background. Growing up in Peru, I was in a Catholic school, Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school. I joined a religious order, the Marist Brothers, and I was a postulant and a novice in the order. Then I left the order as a novice, and my family immigrated to Canada. But I continue in this path of learning about spirituality, philosophy, theology. So yes, I am an academic, but I try to be an academic that is very much in touch with his spiritual self, right? And that's a challenge too as an academic, I would say, right? So my work with indigenous peoples back in Peru, and I just want to clarify, by the way, I am from Peru, but I am not an indigenous person myself. Sometimes people think because of maybe the way how I look or something, they might think I'm indigenous. I'm not. And this is also part of what I want to share, how to be committed and trying to do our best to join on these efforts in Canada today for reconciliation when one is a settler, when one is not an indigenous person, when one is an immigrant, even one is not a mainstream so-called white Canadian, right? Do we have a role in this work for reconciliation if one comes from somewhere else? I would say yes, we all have a role, and we all enrich the work of reconciliation in Canada. So I work in part of my PhD, part of my work as an academic is to be in committees ecumenically and interreligiously to foster or prevent, actually, I would say, to foster interreligious friendship, yes, but in particular to prevent spiritual violence being committed on indigenous peoples and indigenous communities. Specifically, I'm talking about, you know, when sometimes people feel, sometimes historically, as you know, the history of the residential schools in Canada, feel very committed to impose in other peoples their own cultures, their own religions. And this is not just something that has happened in the past, this is something that still happens today. And it's not just done by non-indigenous persons, it's also done by indigenous persons themselves too, who have been become Christians. And sometimes there is this fear of other traditions, sometimes one's own tradition, right? If they are indigenous, let's say, and basically starting to commit violence against indigenous practices, for example. So that is when there are communities that react very strongly, Christian communities, whether Catholic or from other traditions, that start feeling very defensive about smudging ceremonies or any other type of teachings on ceremonies. So I want to mention this because I want to first of all say that this is a problem that still exists in Canada, and that churches are trying to deal with it. But I would say it's very difficult to deal with it because it challenges our very identity as Catholics or as Christians, because now we need to think differently about ourselves in order to treat others differently, right? So it's not just a challenge to be nice to others, it's a challenge to rethink and develop differently in our own identities as Canadians, as Catholics, and so on. It's a very difficult challenge, but I want to mention that it's been very encouraging for me, and I want to encourage you too, this type of work ecumenically and interfaith, in particular with indigenous peoples. And the Catholic Church, of course, has a lot of resources, philosophically, theologically, spiritually, to share with other traditions in terms of solidarity with people from other communities. Unfortunately, sometimes, as we know, the structures of the Catholic Church can be a little bit rigid, I would say, and it's difficult how that spirituality or theology translates in concrete actions of solidarity and so on, right? So that is something that's a broader conversation, but that is something to keep in mind, as I mentioned, you know, how we can engage in this work of reconciliation, especially when one is a Christian or a Catholic and is connected to all this history of colonization of indigenous peoples. Think about residential schools. How can we do that authentically? Well, it's gonna need to be done in friendship with people from other traditions, not just Catholics. It's going to be done in friendship with people from other religious traditions, not just Christians, and definitely in friendship with indigenous peoples themselves and their own spiritualities. And if we don't know how to do that, then we're going to run into a big, big problem. So part of my work is to, in a way, work on education of not just, you know, at the level of the parishes or schools, but at the level of the hierarchies of the churches. So work with church leaders and try to help us encounter each other, other church leaders, and learn from other traditions, especially from indigenous spiritualities. So if you happen not to be indigenous, like myself, or if you happen to be someone who's Catholic but came from another country, or from a different cultural background, or someone who philosophically is very curious and questioning, and all this, I would say, shouldn't be interpreted as something bad or as something that is going to stop us to contribute to the work of reconciliation in Canada. I would say we're all called, especially now in Canada, to discover these personal talents we have as individuals, and try to bring them to the table in service for this work of reconciliation that it's just beginning, by the way. It's just beginning. We're just trying to figure it out, how to do it all together in a good way. So I just want to close with that. As you notice, I just wanted to share with you some of this personal experience. I didn't want to teach or anything like that. I'm not a priest either, right? So I'm not teaching the catechism or anything like that. I wanted to share with you some of my experience in my Catholic background, and how that has helped me and encouraged me to enter this work of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada, even without being an Indigenous person myself. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Muchas gracias, hermano Benjamin. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for your efforts, especially for sharing how we as non-white people can make this bridge between Christianity and indigenous relations. Many of your former students have spoken to me highly of how privileged it was to hear you, and I'm so glad to hear you once again. And I wish you all the best for your doctoral thesis. We'll be waiting to hear you again to share your part of your research with us again. Thank you. And friends, I'm very happy again to introduce a member of the Canadian Council of Imams, Brother Imam Irshad Osman. Is a khatib, a person who delivers the sermon at Friday prayer at the Danforth Islamic Center and other mosques in the GTA. As a religious leader, Brother Imam Osman volunteers his time with many Toronto-based organizations, advocating for social justice, minority rights, true inclusion, anti-racism and anti-hate, and supports a number of interfaith collaborations to find solutions. Recently, Imam Osman initiated the first ever Muslim Indigenous Connection program to train 25 Muslim youth to learn about indigenous spirituality and way of life, to understand their past and present struggles due to settler colonialism. The program aimed at increasing Muslim youth engagement with indigenous peoples through interfaith dialogue and education, while raising awareness among the wider Muslim community in Canada.
Thank you so much, Father Prakash. Hello, everybody, and it's my pleasure to be here with all the esteemed panelists today. And I learned a lot during the first couple of presentations. Looking forward to learning from all of you as well. Father Prakash asked me to talk about the Muslim Indigenous Connection Program. We just concluded and had the graduation last weekend on Sunday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. So in fact, so this is like a, it started as like a 2-week program, but it ended up as a 5-month program, because as we moved forward, we learned a lot, and it turned out to be more than what we anticipated in the beginning. So I have put together a kind of a roadmap, how I'm going to structure my speech so that to capture everything within that 6 minutes. So the first one is the spark, and what the spark and the inspiration and the proposal and the consultation and the partners and the program structure. And then moving on, I'll talk about the why we selected youth and implementation, how to implement, highlights and learnings and challenges, and what next for MIC. Okay, start with the spark. After the discovery of mass graves in the summer, all the imams through the Canadian Council of Imams and Justice for All Canada, we issued a statement. We read out a statement after the Friday sermon. While I was in that podium at the sermon pulpit reading that statement to my congregation, the last word actually shocked me. It says that our pledge to you as relatives, or Indigenous brothers and sisters, we will stand and work with you to bring healing, justice, and peace with truth and reconciliation. I'm sorry that the phone is ringing. The reason I was shocked is that I felt that this is a pledge as a Muslim I have to uphold, but unfortunately I haven't done anything in that front. So how, as a person, that's a moment of clarity and moment of truth for me to do that. So that's how the spark came. I need to do something, because I have already promised to my congregation, we are going to stand with the Indigenous brothers and sisters. And then the inspiration came from, there are many inspirations from our religion, as Father Prakash asked me to elucidate on. One is that they acknowledge in the host. Then Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he went to any, starting from he migrated to Medina, and all the religious leaders, whenever they go to any land, they always honored the people of the land and they acknowledge the leaders of the land. And they were very sensitive to the cultures and the norms of the people who lived there. And then as such, we are settlers by way of immigration. So are we acknowledging, are we honoring the owners of the land? So this is inspiration number one. Second is the prophetic mission of Christ. Christ is an Arabic word for justice. That all the prophets who came up until the Prophet Muhammad, everybody else, the common mission was standing up for justice and standing against any oppression and standing with the people who have been oppressed. So this we all know as faith leaders. And the third one is about the responsibility as stewards, the stewards of the earth. We are the stewards of the earth. We have a responsibility. We are the caretakers of the environment and also advocates for the poor and the marginalized. And then after putting together all these ideas, I developed a proposal. The proposal with the identified gaps and clear outcomes. The biggest gap I found as an interfaith practitioner is that whenever I go to any interfaith sessions, I don't see members representing Indigenous community. Mostly it's Abrahamic religions. So there is a glaring absence in any interfaith circles, people coming and sharing their spirituality. So I want to address that gap. What is that mistrust? As my previous speaker said, there's a mistrust. How do we rebuild that trust? So based on that, I developed the proposal and with clear outcomes. As for consultation and partners, I was already a fellow of the KCIT. So I presented this proposal to them. They loved it. They said, yes, go ahead, Imam, we will support it. And then I reached out to Justice for All, who initiated that khutbah campaign. And then Zulfa Foundation, because they are based in Brantford. This is one of the areas where I envision to visit, because it's nothing like learning from the people themselves instead of learning everything in theory. And the program structure, I developed the program structure in 4: education, awareness, engagement, and relationship building. I will go into the last, I will show you a video of how the program structure looks like. And then continuing, why youth? And because everybody said that, why can't you train the imams? Why can't you train the adults, etc., etc.? But I specifically said, no, we have to get the youth, because they are the change makers. They're already social justice advocates in their school and in the school system, TDSB or TCDSB. They're already working with many causes. Why not Muslim youth learn about the Indigenous communities? So now the main idea for me is to develop the education, learning from them, learning about their spirituality, not the relief work or not the advocacy, because most of the time we see Muslim communities, anything happens, they go with relief. We fundraise and we relieve. It's not the relief important, but to relieve, to stand with them. What do we know about them? What is the education we have to learn about how to have this dialogue? And the implementation part is that initially I expected about 10 people to sign up and 55 youth applicants. We expanded our scope, selected 23 students graduated last week on the great feedback, because we developed a lot of feedback forms for them to give their opinions and their suggestions. We also appointed 3 youth coordinators to coordinate with all our youth. Highlights is the micro projects, because in the end of the program, after going through this education and awareness session, and they had to, each group, 8 members in each group have to implement the micro projects. They had to learn project management skills. They had to learn leadership skills and reaching out to the community. And that we had greater community interest. And learnings and challenges, a lot, but I can't cover everything. I'll be happy to talk if in a different session. But the number one learning is the listening. Nothing about us without us is true for the Indigenous community. So not only I consulted all the Indigenous leaders and the Muslim leaders on how to build this program, our youth also, as a learning, they learned, and for all their micro projects, they consulted with the Indigenous communities who they supported, asking, what is it? How can we help? How can we build allyship with you? And then the trust building is also important, which one of the things which I don't have time to talk about. And what's next for MIC? And now we are going to scale up. During the graduation ceremony too, a lot of ministers came. They said, this is amazing program, historical program. I would like to see this happening in Edmonton and Alberta and all the other provinces. So let us know how we can help. And then I'm individually, as well as a team, I'm consulting with several Indigenous leaders, especially from the education sector. There are teachers who are working with the Indigenous TDSB as well as the TCDSB. And we have received a lot of interest from the schools itself, high school, how you can implement this program in our schools. And finally, our youth signed a pledge. I can't show you the pledge right now. There's a pledge saying that how they are going to continue this commitment beyond this program. I will quickly show you the slides of the 4 group projects. The Andayun donation drive for a women's shelter, and the online fundraiser for the only immersion school in 6 nations. And there was a website built and blog were written. And then they also started to do another project for the mental health struggles connecting the mental health struggles faced by Indigenous youth because of intergenerational trauma, as well as the Muslim youth. So here are the details of each projects. And so let me end this with showing the video which my son put together for our graduation, putting together all the highlights. You have time, 2 minutes? Are we good for time?
We unfortunately, Harpreet needs to speak still, and it's already 9:54.
It's a 1.5 minute video.
Okay, you know what, let's play it. And I'm hoping that participants, many did say they could stay beyond 10 for the informal program. And just Imam, Osman, it's okay if you share the slide deck, because then we could share as well later with the participants.
Sure, okay, we'll do that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Imam Osman. Now let us welcome Harpreet Kaur Neelam, who presently is pursuing her doctorate in education and social justice education while on maternity leave with her 2 children, 5 and 2 years of age. She's an educator and has had the opportunity to work with the Peel District School Board as a teacher, resource teacher, curriculum coordinator, and at the Ministry of Ontario in Inclusive Education branch. She's currently on the advisory board of the World Sikh Organization and was on the founding board of the Sikh Feminist Research Institute. Her passion is singing kirtan, Sikh spiritual music, which she's been performing on stages at Gurdwaras since she was 5 years of age. Welcome, Harpreet. As the only woman on the panel, we're giving you the last word.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today to speak on behalf of the Sikh perspective. I appreciate the title of today's event and the direction to write about justice and reconciliation of the First Nations people of the Turtle Island with the frame of learn, listen, engage. I'm so honored to be speaking with this panel. I've learned so much in the last hour, so thank you so much. To begin, today I'm speaking from the unceded lands of the Anishnaabe and the Haudenosaunee. I'm a colonial settler. This means that to live here, I have made a contract with the Government of Canada, whose history has demonstrated a genocide of the First Nations of Turtle Island. I also acknowledge I've obtained an immense amount of privilege as I live on this land. For example, while I had the privilege of finding a teacher on this land to teach me my cultural heritage of Kirtan or Sikh music, or whether I used government-sponsored heritage classes to learn my Indigenous language of Punjabi, I learned that Indigenous children were sent to residential schools, or more correctly titled internment and torture centers to kill the Indian. They had their culture, music, and language, family ripped away from them. I listen and learn that right now, First Nations across Turtle Island, at their own cost, are recovering thousands of children's graves at these sites, and we hear silence. It is my privilege that our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tells me, as someone living in the diaspora, that farmers and laborers had the right to peacefully protest at the borders of India, just like now as the predominantly white truckers had the right to protest at the capital and the borders of Canada for almost a month before that narrative changed. Yet, when our First Nations people have resisted for legitimate reasons, they have been continuously dispersed with violence. Let us listen and learn about Native People's Caravan in September 1974, when the riot police used clubs, shields, and tear gas to disperse the protest that came from all over the country. Let's listen and learn about the violence incurred during the protests in Caledonia or 1492 Landback, Oka, and now Wet'suwet'en, where multiple violent arrests are made regularly, just to name a few. As a colonial settler, I'm complicit. I'm grateful to obtain my rights from the Canadian government. However, I listen and learn that is coming at a great cost in the past and now in the present day to the First Nations people of Turtle Island. My family has clean water to drink. My family has the infrastructure where the government has set up schools that can be rivaled with the best in the world. Yet many of these privileges do not exist for our Indigenous children and families in reservations across Canada. Let's learn and listen about the 60 Scoop, or the displacement of Indigenous to the Northern Canada, or the government giving criteria of who can be First Nation. So to engage, it is easy to give a land acknowledgement at the beginning of every meeting, because in the end, it adds to a couple of minutes, but in the end, what really changes? We're lucky to have this environment today where we can talk together about how we can make a change. It is easy to make commitments when our world stays status quo. We need to recognize that our world may need to be disrupted for reparation or repair to happen. And why use the word reparations and not reconciliation? Reconciliation happens when two sides get into a disagreement and there is restoration from both sides. What we must honor is that everyone on this land is our treaty people. It is only the settlers that didn't honor their treaties. Hence the word reparations. Settlers are the ones that need to repair. Yet we ask again and again for our Indigenous friends, family, to give us their time, to teach us, to educate us, to show up for us, and give more of them to us. And they do, with grace. They don't give hope on us. We as colonial settlers need to show up for the First Nations and the injustices that have happened and are happening against them right now. We need to be part of this resistance. This is the Sikh way. To make it our responsibility to learn what is going on, to engage and do our part by following the lead of Indigenous voices. We do this by listening. The Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh scripture, talks about the power of listening. Every morning in our morning reflection, we have 3 stanzas that remind us of this power. And one of the last lines is, Sune hat hove aska, from listening, the unreachable comes within your grasp. That means we listen, we learn, we transform, and we engage with this new understanding. We are all in different places in our journey. For some, it may be learning about Indigenous issues. For some, it may be to listen and using our privilege, always giving space to the Indigenous voices in our privileged space around us. We need to engage. If we do believe in this government, then raising our voice to our municipal, provincial, and Canadian governments by writing letters, signing petitions, and showing up and protesting. Education, living standards, honoring our treaties for First Nations, recovering all those children from those sites is our problem, our collective problem. Being a steward of this land, which the Indigenous have always been doing for all of our children and theirs, which has been the Indigenous way have been living, shouldn't just rest on their shoulders. For a Sikh, born from revolution and social justice, means to stand up for what's right and this is what it means to love. The Sikh philosophy to engage can be drawn from the line in the Guru Granth Sahib, which can be translated as fear none, frighten none. Let's look at the first part of the line. Tu kahe to detne, fear none. Do not be afraid of anyone. In the case of injustice, do not be afraid to raise your voice. Not be afraid to call out against injustice. Our job is to resist. Through demonstration, through raising voice, through solidarity. That resistance may look very different in any given situation, calling out racism, heteropatriarchy, capitalism, classism, casteism, sexism. In the footsteps of Guru Nanak, the first Sikh feminist, our first Guru, says, if you want to play the game of love, be prepared to give your life. It is love to fight against injustice, as he did against casteism, classism, and gender inequality whenever he saw it. He was jailed and punished for it too. The second part of the line is fear none, or is frighten none. Nap and manit on. We all have privilege. I'm a middle-class, cisgendered, heterosexual woman. I have privilege. Our Guru says we must recognize our privilege and not frighten anyone. Or in other words, do not use our privilege to oppress anyone. We must work in becoming more self-aware and then eliminating that oppression that we may inflict on someone, where we may hold more power. It is the impact, not intention, that matters. We need to educate ourselves to recognize that sometimes our intention can be harmful, to be constantly checking ourselves, and then when we realize we have erred, to be humble, apologize, and repair by changing our behavior. It is not my intention of this talk to amplify binaries of settler, indigenous, or oppressor, victimized, because a narrative, as our previous panelists have said, it's much more complex than that. Ultimately, we are all equally human. And so in the last minute, I want to sing a Shabad, Raka E Kamara Swami, which recognizes that there's one force that protects all of us and that is in all of us. When we recognize the presence of this force, we sit, stand, wake, sleep without worry. And peace inside ourselves and outside in the world will only come if we honor this force or divinity.
Thank you so much, Harpreet. Thank you for sharing your passion for social justice, for the invitation to reflect on privilege, the self-awareness piece, as well as a very strong call for action. So we appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. At this point, we're wrapping up the speaker panel portion of our event. We hope that you're all inspired to continue learning about justice and reconciliation. And we remind you to access the resources that we have provided, along with some action ideas in those resources on the slide deck that was shared with all the participants. And we will try to include additional information. Again, we apologize for each panel speaker that you weren't able to be given the due time. Like all of the work that everyone here has shared has been amazing. You could all be keynote speakers in your own fashion. And so again, we apologize, but we did want to have sharing from the diverse faith traditions within a schedule that also accommodated the classroom schedules for those in schools. So thank you again. And the link to this learning slide deck will be posted in the chat. Now we invite Kathy and Sister Petit to share the closing prayer and song, and then Michael Caccamo, our Superintendent of Nurturing Our Catholic Community at Toronto Catholic, to do the final remarks.
As our program draws to a close, let us pray for reconciliation and peace. We pray especially for peace in Canada, peace in the Ukraine and in the Middle East, along with other communities in need. Let us pray that we may all come to honor our sacred connection. Gracious Creator God, we give thanks and praise for this wondrous world in which we live. Beauty and diversity surround us. All of creation beholds amazing wonder. You, O God, give life to all peoples, animals, plants, and the earth. We are all so closely related and connected. Lead us to a deeper understanding of the Indigenous peoples who have shared their wisdom and understanding of this connectedness. Help us to heal the fractured relationships of the past so that honor, reverence, and dignity can bind us together. The Indigenous peoples believe deeply we are all related. May we strive to believe and live in that spirit. Amen.
This Wayata Maori song was composed and gifted by Dr. Rose Perry, a Maori elder who sadly passed away in 2020 at the age of 83 years old. Her traditional name was Rangi Marie. She taught this song in Utah in 2015 in the Parliament of World Religions and also in 2018. The translation of the song is peace, love, truth, joy to the universe. And join me in singing this song and extending peace, love, truth, and joy to the universe. Ahiyo kite aurangi, ahiyo kite aurangi, aroha kite aurangi, aroha kite aurangi, o no kite aurangi, o no kite aurangi, Kwa, 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 kite aurangi. Kwa, 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 kite aurangi. Iyo, kite aurangi. Iyo, kite aurangi.
Thank you, Sister Petit. That was beautiful. At this point now, we call on Michael Caccamo, Superintendent of Nurturing a Catholic Community at Toronto Catholic District School Board, to give closing remarks for the formal program.
Thanks very much, Audrey. That is beautiful. That was beautiful. And it's my special privilege to bring expressions of gratitude to all who've been instrumental in bringing to fruition this important World Interfaith Harmony Week event. In particular, our thanks to Father Prakish and Daniel from the Archdiocese of Toronto Office for Interreligious Dialogue, to Kathy Murtha from the Mary Ward Center, to Elder John and to Sister Petit for our beautiful opening and closing ceremonies, song and prayer, to our guest panelists from various spiritual traditions, Q-Rock, Yacov, Benjamin, Imam Osman and Harpreet, for sharing with us their personal experiences, their knowledge, their belief systems, and how their faith has informed their work on justice and reconciliation. And thanks to the student and staff representatives from the 4 school boards, Toronto, York, Simcoe, Muskoka, and Peterborough, Victoria, Northumberland, and Clarington Catholic school boards, and to all our guest participants. It's truly wonderful that you could join us today in this important learning experience. A special thanks to my colleagues from the TCDSB for all their support and work, from our Indigenous education team, Sonia Charal, and from the Nurturing Our Catholic Community team, Lisa, Asna, Veronica, Mike, and in a special way, of course, Audrey for her leadership. In closing, it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to participate in this opportunity for people of diverse backgrounds to listen, learn, and engage in works of justice and reconciliation, promoting dialogue, cooperation, mutual understanding, and harmony between all people, regardless of their faith. Let us all endeavor to continue in this same spirit. Blessings to you all.
So we know that period 1 classes are ending and others have to leave. Those who can are welcome to stay for some time with the panelists as we start the informal program. So we are going to set out breakout rooms and a different panelist will be in each one. You can choose the panelist you'd like to speak to by going to the icon at the bottom of the screen and selecting that panelist. And a moderator from the planning team will join each panelist and you can ask any questions you have and have a conversation with that panelist.
Actually, I'm wondering, because I think we all fit on the screen and there's not so much time left, maybe we just stay in the main room. Is everyone okay with that? And we just do a Q&A in the main room. That might work. Yeah, is that great? Okay, perfect. So anyone is welcome to raise their hands using the Zoom function or to unmute, and then you're welcome to ask questions.
Audrey, how much time do we have for this full section?
So unfortunately, we only have 15 minutes. Just to honor the time with some panelists who have to leave. Are there any? We wanted to open the floor with questions for participants, but we actually had some questions ourselves. So if there is no one, Mike, you could lead them.
Okay, great. Just in case there are period 2 people that did not see anything, can we have each panel member just tell us their name as well as either their tradition or organization they represent? And let's go in the same order as our presentation. So Q, you first.
Hello, greetings everyone. My name is Q-Rock. As an artist, my traditional name is Manitsu Neeman. It loosely translates to spirit dancing. I'm Anishnaabe from the Anishnaabe Nation in Odawa. I'm from Nipissing First Nations, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist.
Thank you, Q. Yacov.
Oh, Yacov said unfortunately he couldn't stay for the panel Q&A.
All right, let's go to Benjamin.
Hey everybody, I'm Benjamin. I'm doing my PhD in theology at the University of St. Michael's College here in Toronto, speaking from my Roman Catholic background.
Thank you, Benjamin. And we have Imam Osman.
Imam
Osman.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Imam Irshad Osman. I am the Imam at Danforth Islamic Center. Yeah.
Thank you, Imam Osman. And Harpreet.
Hi, my name is Harpreet. I come from the Sikh tradition. I'm currently doing my doctorate in social justice education. I'm also a teacher. And in my introduction, I talked about, being a mom of 2 very young kids.
Thank you to all the panelists. I do have a question, and let's go in reverse order. The question I have is, how far away do you think Canada is from genuine truth and reconciliation? If you can give us a number between 1 and 10, 1 being we're so far away, 10 being that's where we want to be. Where are we at right now? And part 2 to that is, how many years do you think it's going to take us to get to 10? So let's go backwards. Harpreet, how would you answer that question?
Oh, I have a math and science background, but then to numerically try to come up with an answer for this seems very challenging. I can say, recently, the amount of awareness that I have learned about the Indigenous because of, the awareness that is coming out has been, all my childhood. I grew up, I went to schools in Canada. I did not know anything about, the schools, all the genocide. I did not know anything of this. And it's just recently that I've started to learn about this. And so I think that has a lot to do with the fact that, the voices are coming out there and they're getting out there. So that's great that the voices are out there, but now we need to act. We need to act. And action, it takes a long time. And we also, sometimes we move forward and then we move backwards and we move forwards and we move back. It's like a cyclical thing. So I think I think it's going to take a while. I think it's going to be forever because we cannot change the past. I think we have to just commit to always working together forward and always be on that path of, and like I said in my talk, I think we have to require this of our governments. We have to require this with our, when we become voters, we need to say, this is an issue that we want to stand up for, and we need to make, and it has to be something that's pressing for all of us. So I think we've started, and I think we do definitely have a long way to go, but I'm so glad that we've started because we're farther today than we were, yesterday.
Thanks, Harpreet. I loved in your talk how you talked about the importance of listening. Imam Osman, I know it was a hard question, but do you have an answer?
Yes, yeah. Before the Truth and Reconciliation report, it was, I would say, 2. And after the discovery of mass graves, it jumped into around 5, close to 5. But I also agree with what Harpreet said, that it's not like it's either it's plateaus or go back. So we have to keep on pushing towards 10. So I don't know how long it's going to take because it took so many years, centuries for us to come to that even 4. And how long? So do the math and find out.
Thanks, Imam Osman. And the answers will definitely lead into the next question I have for everyone. Benjamin, what do you think?
Maybe I'm more pessimistic even than and I think might take a long time. Depends how much we're willing as Canadians to rethink the country politically, economically, socially, culturally. Multiculturalism is still in the works, so-called, and started in the 70s or 60s, but it's not enough, of course, right? And it has a lot of problems, multiculturalism as an identity, as a policy too, and lots of beautiful things too. But if this is a lot more challenging than just multiculturalism. This is being open, all of us, to reconstruct the not just the cultural, but the political, especially without land, without giving back land, and getting all together to empower the agency of Indigenous peoples. If we're not serious about that, we can talk all we want, but Canada continues being Canada, and there's not going to be much justice. And finally, in terms of the church, the Catholic Church, also, I'm not that optimistic. Changes happen very, very slowly within the Catholic Church, and any kind of justice with Indigenous peoples in Canada would presuppose justice with women, justice with sexual minorities, justice with all that kind of more exclusionary attitude that sometimes is still present, even though not theologically that much sometimes, but in the culture of the institution and of the peoples, right? So it's a serious change that could take quite some generations to fulfill.
Generations, yeah. We've taken steps, but definitely a long, long way to go. Q-Rock, what do you think?
You know, from my perspective, I haven't seen any changes. These are stories that I grew up knowing. I have uncles that I never knew. They never came home. There were so many people that were lost from my reservation. And we knew how that they were lost. We knew that they were buried in those hills. We knew where they were, but we were never acknowledged. We were told we were exaggerating. My whole life, I have been trying to educate non-Native people about the horrific tortures my mother, my father went through. And my friends tell me that it's not true. And that's because that we have a lot of false narratives in our communities, and we need to remove those false narratives and begin the education process. I'm always optimistic because I believe in humanity, and I believe that we can come together. For the First Nations people across Turtle Island, we've always wanted to have a fair opportunity to sit at the table that was created by the colonizers, so that we can be a representation of our nation instead of other people speaking for us, other people educating about our culture. I think one of the most important parts of Truth and Reconciliation is allowing Indigenous people to tell their stories. Building bridges is really important. That'll help with the progress. In the future, I could see a lot of great changes happening, but the communication has to be consistent. The Anishnaabe people, from where I'm from, we build long-term relationships. It's meant to be that we are family, we are all connected. Even though we may have different beliefs, the Anishnaabe will always respect others' beliefs. And it's important that for us, especially in these times, now that we are a topic of conversation, is to not let this conversation become a whisper again. We want this to be a song that we all sing. Just as proud as people sing that Canadian anthem, I sit down for that anthem. I've never stood up for the Canadian anthem. But what I will stand up for is for humanity, the salvation and preservation of humanity. Chemigwech, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Q. Very powerful. So that leads to the next question. And anyone who is watching, any of the students, any of the teachers, if there's a question that you have for any of the panelists, please type it in the chat box and we will try to get to it. But the question we have is, and some of you answered it already, but is there anything you think needs to happen specifically, ideally sooner than later, to help us move closer to reconciliation? And not directed at anyone in particular, but feel free to raise your hand or just turn on your mic, and Imam Osman will go with you first.
Yeah, this is something which I have been telling. See, Canada is a land of immigrants. There are almost about 300 to 400,000 people are coming every year. What do they know about the owners of this land? So we only, as an immigrant, came to this country 15 years ago. I only learned about Indigenous community when I wanted to become a citizen. That too, only 2 pages. So I think the education of people who are coming in has to start before they come in. So it has to be a mandatory practice, best practice, to teach them about where they're coming in. Just like we learn about every culture, why not about Indigenous history?
That is a great, great suggestion for sure. Anyone else? Anything that you think needs to happen in order for us to reach reconciliation?
I would say this is one area that I'm working on. The TRC calls to action include a call for a recognition of the value of indigenous spiritualities, especially from the churches that run residential schools, including especially the Catholic Church. And recognizing indigenous spiritualities, it says that TRC documents as valid as their own. And that is something that I see people struggling with to understand what that means, as valid as one's own. And but that is a call to be that is being asked for the Christian churches in particular. And I'm working on that, and I would hope that in the near future, in the next years, the Catholic Church and other Christian churches can make a statement recognizing officially that other traditions, especially indigenous spiritualities, in what sense they are as valid as their own Christian traditions.
Thank you, Benjamin. Q, I have a question for you related to this. Is we're talking about, getting to a 10, getting to genuine truth and reconciliation. What's one thing that has to happen? And if that doesn't happen, we will never get to a 10.
I think to get to a 10, it would have to be like an entire, like a community effort that is a commitment by all, like a pledge almost, to honor those treaties. There's something that's between my nation that started in 1746 in the Haudenosaunee, the spoon with the one bowl. That's a wampum belt treaty. And that wampum belt was created between our nations so that we would stop fighting each other. And right now, the Canadian government is still attacking First Nations people. I'm very close to my reservation. I speak to my chief all the time. I know a lot of the problem is the government won't meet us at the table and even listen to us. They do not acknowledge our requests for meetings. My chief, he has tons of things he would love to share about how we can move forward with truth and reconciliation. There are many people that are working the front lines, and I feel like in order for us to get to the destination we would all like to see, which is peace, balance, and harmony, the efforts will have to be that it's a consensus idea that everyone is aware of and committed to acknowledging and doing their part. And it's, I'm very young. I wasn't affected by residential school directly, but indirectly, I definitely was in my community. I seen what it did to my uncles and aunts and how it broke them. It broke their spirits. A lot of them didn't want to be Anishnaabe anymore. A lot of them didn't even want to be humans. The fact that we're here right now, it shows the progression. It shows that there is a direction we are heading in together. But it has to be together. It's not just a role that we individually do. It's not an individual thing. This is about community. This is about us coming together. And there's prophecies that we have in my community with that medicine wheel. The medicine wheel teaches us that one day all humanity will come together and form that perfect circle. And that's something I've always looked forward to. Their symbol right here was given to me. This is an Odawa symbol. This is a petroglyph. It was made 6,000 years ago. This is the symbol for the salvation and preservation of humanity. It's a representation of the moon and the sun and the roles of man here on Mother Earth. In the center is the moon, Grandmother Moon. She's a very, very powerful spirit to us. And it shows that there is a stronger power of femininity than masculinity here on Mother Earth. And this actually teaches us the role of man, of what men are supposed to be doing here on Mother Earth. And this teaching is about the men being protectors and defenders of women, not controllers or to try to be a dominant figure. I think there's so much education that we can learn from each other about how we can learn to work together and learn from one another. And I think I think right now it's the hardest part because we're getting started. But once we gain momentum, it won't surprise me to see it happening a lot quicker. But it just needs these kinds of events, these kinds of conversations. They need to be more familiar, more common. And that's when the changes will happen. And I believe that the big changes will happen from the youth. I'm kind of like too old now, but it's the youth, the future 7 generations. If we bring them to the table and we give them a voice, I think that'll create a lot faster change.
Thanks, Q. Audrey, can I do a time check? How much more time do we have?
So unfortunately, we are at time. Imam Osman actually had to leave as well already. So that's a beautiful way to end off, I think, the event. I've been so inspired and touched by what I've heard today from all the panelists and even just with this discussion after. So I just want to say thank you. It's such an honor and privilege. Really, really appreciate the sharing that has happened and in the learning. For myself, I can speak for myself, the learning as well. So at this point, to all those participants who have been kind of quietly listening, thank you for joining us. Again, we appreciate your presence. If you wish to learn more about other interfaith dialogues that are happening in the future, there is the Archdiocese of Toronto Office for Interreligious Dialogue website that posts events. We also have the Interfaith Youth Alliance movement website that also posts events too, iam.ca. And Kathy, I don't know if the Mary Ward Center posts events as well. I'm not sure.
We will be.
Okay. Okay, great. And then Benjamin, Q Rock, Harpreet, I think the other speakers have left. We will be posting the video and we'll share the link as well to you all in case you ever need it for anything. And are you okay if we share this with, actually, we did say we'd share it with participants. Are you actually okay if we shared this with teachers as well in our school board? Because I think it would be a really great learning experience for them too, like our world religions teachers to share with their classes. A number of them couldn't come or register today. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything. Yeah,
Yes,
you're
I
good?
did. I did want to say one thing. It just came to mind. I apologize. I do respect everyone's time, but something just came to mind and I thought it was a great opportunity to share this. If you've ever wanted to approach a Native elder, there's a protocol that we have. And it's our way of basically initiating a relationship. And I think that's really important for us, is to understand that we do here as First Nations people have a protocol of how we introduce each other, especially if we're from different nations, especially if we're trying to develop a relationship. So it's a very fairly easy protocol to follow. Anytime that you approach an elder, we're taught that you should offer tobacco to that elder in a tobacco tie. A tobacco tie is just a simple cloth that you can use. One second, I'll show you what I use. I typically will just use like a red cloth like this. And I grow my own tobacco. So I would hold the tobacco in my hand. You can pray into the tobacco, whatever you would like from that offering. You offer it to that tobacco, and when you give it to the elder will actually do a ceremony. And I think that's just something that I think we should really, one thing that'd be really helpful to everyone who's non-Native when they're approaching Native elders. This is a common practice for majority of the First Nations people across Turtle Island, so America and Canada. And what you do is you just put the tobacco inside the center of your tobacco, your fabric, and you simply just tie it together. And it doesn't have to be big. Like I would probably cut this in half for sure if I were to offer a tobacco tie with this fabric. But it's a common, very common protocol. There's an old saying, the English translation is tobacco first. It's very high indication of respect, and it shows that you are taking the initiative to be polite and to learn our culture. And an elder cannot refuse the conversation when you offer tobacco. So I thought I'd share that. Chemigwech.
Thank you so much. I hadn't actually known that. We've done tobacco ties as thank yous when we've done face-to-face presentations, but I actually had not known about offering it at the beginning. And just in the virtual environment, I'm just curious, is there something that, like when we're emailing someone, or is there a way that can translate into still being able to do that protocol?
It has to be in person.
It always has to be in person. Okay.
Yeah, because you have to give them, it's before, we have a way of communicating, and sound is the last thing that we use. So before you say anything, you offer tobacco, because tobacco represents the Eastern direction, which is in spirit, where in the 4 directions that Elder John was mentioning. In the East is where spirit is. In the South is where your emotions are. In the West is where your body is. And in the North is where your mind is. And the way that we communicate is called circular thinking. And so the first thing you must do is show a spiritual introduction of yourself. And the tobacco is of the 4 sacred medicines, tobacco is the most sacred.
Thank you. This is wonderful. I wish that this could be a whole day thing, really, because there's so much learning that needs to happen.